Welcome to our meeting tonight. Let's all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, again, as always, welcome folks. See everybody here tonight. As far as roll call, we see everyone here present tonight. So we will have the agenda that's before us. Are there any additions or?
Mr. Supervisor, just a note that we'll be offering a substitute motion for item 7A1, which has been presented to the board at the table tonight.
That's okay. All right. Therefore, if that's it, the agenda is approved. And we will go right on down to the no presentations, so we have public comment. Anybody tonight?
Yeah, I'd like to start on that.
Got somebody right here first.
Hi, I'm Doreen Hannon. I'm the director of the Salem South Lyon Library. And I just came tonight to tell you that this week we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of being a district library. So in 1993, Salem and South Lyon joined together. And it's been a very well-used place. It's a great resource for both of our communities. It's worked really well. And we're doing all kinds of celebrations this week. We're celebrating our 4.5 million checkout. And we're celebrating our top 25 library users who have all checked out over 4,000 items each. And they are going to get a special gold VIP card. And we have a photographic journey on display both at the library and on Facebook. We have our new logo gear, which is going to be on sale this week. And little coloring pages for little kids. We have golden tickets hidden in different library materials, which will give a prize to use our used book room. If you're on Facebook, we have lots of trivia questions with prizes this week. And there's also historic videos where we've done some video conversations with some of the original persons involved with getting the district library going, as well as avid library users. Some of them I know you'll recognize. And so I just wanted to share that good news, and I wanted to provide you with our latest annual report. So thank you for your time.
Doreen, thank you. Now I owe you a phone call. You know, we talked right in the very beginning when I was seated, and we do need to get together, so I apologize.
Okay,
We will get together. All right, thanks. Thanks for your presentation. Okay, who's up next? Greg?
One last time, right? Over the weekend, I found an ordinance that was passed by the Township in June of '07 that says any petition for a rezoning amendment to the official zoning map that includes proposed conditions or voluntary use or development limitations shall be returned to the applicant without Township review for consideration. I verified it was published in the Ann Arbor News, so it is a Township ordinance. Apparently you guys are considering going forward with this based on some semantics between conditional zoning, conditional rezoning. Look back through the paperwork. The official public hearing, notice of public hearing, refers to this application as a request to a conditional rezoning. Mr. Pennington's report, where he says amendment to zoning map versus rezoning. This amended application is submitted under Section 405 of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, Public Act 110 of 2006, which is exactly what the ordinance is disavowing, saying that the Township will not accept. Ms. Cripps referred to this in her letter to the Planning Commission, I believe, not to the trustees. And in doing that, she also referenced verbatim Section 405 of Act 110. There's a number of places in the paperwork, the paper trail that's followed this, where people refer to it as conditional zoning and conditional rezoning. And I don't think that you can, in good conscience, vote on an amendment this evening that is in violation of an ordinance that's already on the books in Salem Township. That's my opinion. I know you have all the experts here. But I'd ask that you don't do it, simply because I believe it opens us up to some severe litigation, honestly, if we pass this. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Jim Thurman, 7920 Tower. I've been watching the rezoning or finding of your plan as far as the conditional use permit. I've always enjoyed your place and the displays you put on. I've been around here for a long time. I've been here since probably '73, living in the area consistently. And I've seen the township boards come and go. One of the common themes, at least in the last 3 boards, is that they were all working for the good of the people, and they were, going to be friendly towards the citizenry and that type of thing. You all know what the results of those have been, and I don't know what this board is, but now 3 or 4 board meetings into your term, we're rezoning your own or reusing your own property for permanent rezoning or redistricting. What I'm asking you to do is to withdraw your petition tonight for the good of Salem. You know, you always are saying that you're doing things for the good of Salem. You don't want to increase the amount of attorney fees that are paid, and whenever you weaken the master plan, you're always asking for challenges to that. It's going to be very difficult for the Planning Commission and also the board, if they vote in favor of this, to reject other people's petitions that they make. And if you do not do that, I ask the board to deny the request tonight and to allow you to continue to do your applications every year. I don't want to call this political favoritism that's going on now, but it seems like we're moving towards that in a new board that is selling themselves as being pro-Salem. I know Mr. Plato knows whenever a master plan is messed with, it always causes concern. I'm sure that he will enjoy making whatever it is, $200 an hour, representing you folks in deposition. And both the Planning Commission and the trustees, I'm sure, would be beautiful fodder for plaintiff counsel. So if you approve it tonight, I'll just chalk it up to political favoritism and see it as business as normal in Salem, as has been the case throughout the time that I've been here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. I usually don't make comments, but I do just want to make a comment to everybody here tonight. First of all, I am not going to vote tonight. Because I can't. Well, let me just finish. But I do want to make a statement that I have done exactly what this township has asked me to do before I was seated. So we can go back to the records, and any of you that oppose it, be glad to show you the information that I was asked by the current board to do what we are asking this board to do tonight. So, the previous board. So, you know, whatever your thoughts are, I'm not going to change your mind. I'm sure everybody's tired of it. But I'm just, as I said, I was asked by the current board, perfectly clear, because some of you don't get it, that the current board, or the previously board, had asked me to do this, and this is exactly what I've done. Okay, who else? Okay.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Three Cedars is for the good of Salem Township, and maybe we could hear what Mr. Pennington has to say about it.
Right, well, we'll get into that when we get to, when it comes to that time, but, thank you. Okay?
You know, it's a shame we hear talk about we don't need to use a lot of attorneys and all that type of thing, but yet the last 2 people that spoke talked about, well, if you don't vote the way they want you to vote, there's going to be litigation. So it sounds like more of the same thing. Well, you know, I heard that about two people say about litigation. I think it's time we get over this litigation stuff and quit playing politics with one another and do the right thing. I know that you started this process because of you reacted to the previous board that came out to your place and started this thing going, and you responded in every way that they asked you to respond. You were not in elective office at that time. So you have every right that every other citizen has in this community to pursue what you need that's right for you, according to all the laws of the township, and you've done all of that. So just because you hold an office doesn't put you at a substandard level to the rest of the citizens in the township. That's all I want to say.
Next.
I'm sorry, I hate to take any time because I did at the last meeting as well, so I'll be brief. My name is Barb Thompson, but I just am so frustrated at some of the comments. Political favoritism? How about political persecution? There is no reason for Three Cedars Farm to be persecuted the way that it has been. The previous supervisor asked Mr. Whitaker to pursue this zoning, which he did. He spent money and all of the things that he needed to do to make that happen. The people of Salem Township, which all of you represent, have spoken loud and clear. They love Three Cedars. They want it to stay here. The Whitakers are moving forward with what they've been asked to do, and any political favoritism has certainly not been shown to the Whitakers. Thank you.
Bonnie?
Oh, I get my turn?
Sorry.
All I wanted to know is if you modified the agenda when you went and accepted it, or if it's just like it is when it was on the net. The agenda? When you said we passed the agenda, did you modify it, or is it still the same?
It's the same.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Jerry?
Hi, my name is Jerry Thompson. I've been a Salem resident for 21 years. And I've been to a few meetings, both with the Planning Commission and, of course, with you guys tonight. And I think out of everybody, I think Bart over here said it the best at a Planning Commission. And he said that, why are we here tonight? And he said, we're here tonight because Three Cedars is successful. We've got other pumpkin patches in Salem Township. But I think one of the board meetings, I think I was at last time, someone can compare it to a Cabela's. I mean, how much more ridiculous can we get to comparing a pumpkin patch to Cabela's? So my point is this, we're here voting over a pumpkin patch, which we got several in Salem already. It's kind of ridiculous. Thank you.
Am I allowed to stand, please?
Sure.
I didn't compare it to Cabela's.
You did.
I did not. I said that with the new zoning,
We have minutes.
it's feasible. It's not the planning commission. It's feasible that an owner of 78976 Mile open up something on the order of Cabela's. There's no limitation that I see in any of the paperwork on the scope, on the scope or the scale of the commercial.
For 4 months a year, Cabela's is.
No, he's asked for everything afforded to him under the Right to Farm Act, which is 12 months. So you could reasonably still, if this passes.
No, it's
you,
never
well,
asked for that.
the dates
are-
the dates are listed.
It's limited by dates.
But then you ask for everything afforded to you under the Right to Farm Act, which is 12 months.
With limitations.
Yeah, but the other point that stuck out is, you said that the township offered you as an option. I believe the other option was to call the Right to Farm Act people and have them report you or vindicate you.
That's got nothing to do with this.
Yeah, it's got everything to do with it, because the Right to Farm Act gives you plenty of room, elbow room to do what you claim you're within the Right to Farm Act.
Okay.
Then you don't need this extra additional commercialism and zoning that you're asking.
They asked him to do it.
And, or call the state. You know, the state say that he's within the Right to Farm
He's
Act.
doing what they asked. It's what
They
he's
gave him
doing.
2 options.
Okay, which one
This
is
one was more expensive.
Okay, well, this is not time, just for public comment, so we need to move on. Okay, who's next? Anybody else? Yes.
Would you explain the difference if it stays the same as it is now, or it goes to the conditional use as a permanent thing? What is the difference? Is it only that you have to apply each year? What changes is what I'm asking.
You want to respond, or I'll respond, whatever.
Mr. Plato, can you let everyone know what the question was?
As I understand the question is basically why does he need this conditional or this conditional use on his property? How does that change the way it is presently?
Right.
And what limitations are there on that? Let me back up with, again, what happened previously, and I had this discussion at the Planning Commission meeting, and that is that originally the prior administration had questioned the zoning for three-seaters. And as a result of that, basically there was a question whether or not three-seaters could do everything they were doing under the Right to Farm Act. Okay? And because of that question, and because of the letter that the Whitakers received, there was an outstanding issue, and it was a cloud basically placed on his operation that Mr. Whitaker wanted to remove. And one way of doing that was, at the suggestion of the township, that he apply for some conditional use of his property, setting forth specifically what he's doing there, what he intends to do. And that's, right now, he's asking to do exactly what he's been doing there, as I understand it, for a number of years. The only thing additional is that he may put pony rides in the future. The only thing different from what he's doing now. Now, if the township board grants this conditional use, the three-seaters farm will be limited to what's in that application. They won't be able to expand that or put anything different in there unless they come back to the board and ask for an amendment to the use that they've been granted. So they're limited by what's in their application.
So why does it have to change? That's what I don't understand. He's already
Pat,
within,
I can answer that.
okay, you're within the right to farm.
Okay, but I can answer that.
Okay.
The problem that this township gave me on September 9th, walking up, is the reason why we're doing this right now. Because I am not going through this again. They came through not giving me any information at all, just said, this is what we're doing. I am not going through it. There are planning commissioners here tonight that went through everything here. They still, today, I'm not going to mention names, but they were here today and said that they never checked the other operations. They don't even know the names of the operations in Salem Township. So there are 3 operations in Salem Township. You get on their websites. They all do hay rides. They all do pumpkin patches. They have corn mazes. They have a country store, just like Three-Seaters. So they're all there. So all of a sudden, it's Three-Seaters Farm targeted, period. But this township, that's all 3. Just get into the websites and you'll see them. All right. So anybody else for comments? We need to move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Okay, to the consent agenda.
All right.
Clerk.
I move that Salem Township approve the following consent agenda items. The first, minutes of the January 22nd, 2013 regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. The second, the minutes of the closed session, January 22nd, 2013. Third, the disbursements for January 2013. They include the general fund, $7,991.36. That includes the checks number 23739 through 23755. It also includes the January check roster of $130,275.75, and that includes checks 23,673 through 23,755. It also includes the payroll for $66,108.15. It includes the Paycor check for $173. It also includes the sewer fund checks for $15,263.07. There were 3 checks issued 1882 through 1884. And finally, the invoices for February, the general fund of $69,750.95.
Support.
Okay, any questions? All right. All those in favor? Let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is passed. Okay, now we move down to the business items under public safety. Mr. Walker, good evening.
Good evening, how you guys doing tonight?
Good.
I guess I'll start with the least controversial thing tonight. Green signs. We found a supplier of green signs. Originally, we were getting them from a company out of Salem. The township was a while back. That company's gone out of business. I do what all good people do when you can't find something. I Googled it. And I found a supplier that actually has been picking up a lot of the customers from the prior person that did this, selling these. So we got a source of them. They have actually sent us a sample of them. They came in yesterday, and it's virtually the exact same sign. So the material, the sign, the stickers, everything's the same. I would prefer that they would be green. They do come in other colors, but we want to try to standardize. That's pretty much what's in the township right now. So if you can't see them, it's green. We're looking at selling these at the township for $20. I think we're going to set it up where you fill out a form. We'll make them in the back, and then all the money goes right back to the township. Nobody's making any profit off this. This is strictly the cost of the shipping, the manufacturing. If there's any money, it goes back to the township. Yes, sir.
Can you have either way the
Yes,
numbers?
good question. So you could do it this way, obviously the numbers would be changed, or this way. So on the application that you'll make, it would specify which way you would like the letters. And you can have more than, this has got 4, I think 5. I don't think we have any 6-digit addresses in the township. So, and actually it's got some little holes in there. You can't really see it in this one. I guess I could have brought one, but there are 4 pre-drilled holes in here that you have to just kind of drill through the plastic. Work out some bolts and stuff like that. And I think the last time we did this, because I went upstairs next door and got the instructions and actual little directions on how to do it, I'll probably create something like that for people who want these to pick them up and how to do them. But that would greatly help us as we talked at the Neighborhood Watch meeting that we had, trying to find addresses, especially when it's raining, foggy, snowy, dark out. Not just for us, but if there's accidents, people can look up and say, oh, this is the street and this is the address. So it helps the community out, it helps us as emergency responders, and although, you know, with locals like us, we generally know the address, but HVA or other police departments don't have our township memorized. So I'd highly encourage, if you don't have one of these, give us a little bit to get them in here. I've got our first set of 25, I'm not sure exactly what the demand will be. If we need to order more, we'll order more. The other thing we've been working on is trying to get our trucks up to speed. We've had a...
Can I ask you a question about the signs?
Sure.
You said you found a new supplier, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Didn't we previously discuss here that there was an old stash of unused signs?
Which I have gotten, yeah, which I have gotten in the fire station. We'll use those up. There was maybe, I think there's about 10 or 20, not a lot.
Thank you.
So I have found those, and that was kind of how I found out who the old person was and how they did them. They actually made a little template. It wasn't really sophisticated. They put the labels in there and they stick them, so got all that information. So if I run across more, I'll certainly take those on. Is there any questions on that? So one of the things we've been having a challenge is, and we had another fire of recent. We were hoping after the holidays that our calls would slow down, but we had another family suffer a tragic loss, a complete loss of their house that they were moving into. And one of the things that we battle, we go pick up water, is we don't have the best water supplies around here. And even from our fire hydrants, we're picking up rocks like this. And when you're shooting them through this is our impeller from our tanker that actually puts pressure behind the water. If I actually pass this around, you would see that this is damaged, and there's actually rocks embedded in this propeller, so it's pretty much destroyed. So when we suck rocks up, whether it comes through a hydrant or if we're using a pond or whatever the case may be, it's very damaging to our pumps. And so we're not easing on our equipment just because we're rural. We don't have the luxury of having a nice city water supply. So we get water wherever we can. We get water fed to us from a multitude of sources. And sometimes the cost of it is it tears up our pumps. And so we're trying to bring up a lot of our trucks, which are pretty much, we got a tanker that's 30 years old that we need to really replace. And we got some trucks that are, 10, 15, 20 years old, and it's a lot of upkeep in them. So what we've created here kind of a list of things that we need to bring the trucks up to speed. And some of it's kind of code. So for example, on a fire rescue truck, the code says that you're supposed to upkeep the tires for 7 years. Now they may look fine, but they take a pretty good beating. You're going over the railroad tracks, you're traveling at high speeds, you're going down our dirt roads. So the code says every 7 years you're supposed to be replaced, no matter if they look fine or not. You're supposed to take them off of an emergency service. You can put them on a tractor or whatever the case may be, something that's not as tactical. If you have a problem with a truck tired on a rescue vehicle, you want it to get there. Our tires are 10 years old. So we're past the stages, we need to replace some of this stuff. So what I've had our mechanics go through with our folks and look at the general fixes that we have here. And this is kind of an itemized what we're requesting to get fixed. We either need to do it now, which I suggest we do, or with the new fiscal year, which comes in 2 months, do it then. But these all need to be fixed, and the longer we wait for this, the more chances we run of our vehicles being damaged additionally or not being able to respond. So was this provided in your packet? Okay, so I can provide this if you'd like a copy of it, but it just kind of summarizes one of the line items. And I'd say a picture's worth 1,000 words, so I kind of brought this impeller, but let me show you one of the issues we had with our main tanker. Just put this picture down here for a second. And what this is here, this is the undercarriage of our water tanker. So we have a 3,000-gallon poly tank. This frame supports that poly tank. And I think this is a 15-year-old truck. And what you'll see, which I'll show you pictures, is the steel is actually corroded through with the dirt and the mud and the stuff that cakes up there. And that undercarriage that's supporting that tank is failing. Now, if that does fail, that plastic tank would actually fall right on the axle of the truck. So this is stuff that we really need to address. Just a longer picture of it. And this is some of the damage that we needed to get and actually address and really couldn't wait for it. And what it's actually supporting, again, more damage, is this big 3,000-gallon tank. So basically what we have in one of our trucks is a swimming pool that comes to the seams that provides water. If we don't have that, there's not much we can do at a fire. We don't use them a lot, thankfully. We don't like to have a lot of fires, but as of recent, we've had, again, another major structure fire with a complete loss of the structure. There's not much we could have done. Fire was pretty much all the way through the roof by the time we even got called to it. We called our neighbors, and we got tremendous support again from Superior, Lyon Township, Northfield, all provided, as well as Ann Arbor Township covered our fire department while we had everybody, all hands, kind of out at the fire. So we've had, again, through the holiday season, and then in this early part of January, we've had a number of fires that really have upped our calls. And then, of course, today we had that high-speed chase that pretty much was on the outskirts of our town. It started on Northville and ended up in Northfield with some impact within Salem. So it's been a pretty busy couple 3 months in the township and around the township. Does the board have any?
Thanks, Jim. And again, if I just happened to be with the guys in the last fire, and it's amazing to watch the guys out there. I mean, it's like the cold freezing and the ice, and to tackle that, putting their lives at risk, and they're just doing a good job. So I appreciate being out there and watching the compassion to the families, which are just devastated. I mean, this family came over to our home afterwards, and the Red Cross was there, and they just from our guys, from the people in our town, it's a blessing to watch people reach out to these people. So, and we're still in contact with them, and they're doing fine, and they're going to rebuild, and we're trying to assist them any way we can. Thanks again, Jim.
Well,
okay, we'll move on to Mr. Trent.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Board members, as you've been apprised, there's a substitute motion for business item 7A-1. I move that Salem Township approve the request of Fire Chief Rockwell to add 2 additional officers with the rank of lieutenant to the Salem Township Fire Department and to post the openings for 30 days to accept applications in compliance with the collective bargaining agreement.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passed. Mr. Trent?
Mr. Supervisor, I move that Salem Township approve the following cost center budget amendment for fiscal year 2012-13. For the total cost center for the fire department, Department 420, to increase the budget from $460,000 to $546,000. With a breakdown as follows: within the fire department, to increase the salaries for fire department runs, $20,000. To reduce the fire department officer salary in the following line item by $3,100. To decrease the fire inspection wages line item by $3,000. To increase in-house training from $50,000 to $75,000. To increase off-site training from $50,000 to $60,000. To reduce the original fire chief salary that was adopted at the beginning of the fiscal year from $32,500 to $22,600. And to increase the vehicle repair maintenance line item 776.005 from $30,000 to $77,000 to capture the bullet list that Fire Chief Rockwell just provided to the board as a summarization of recommended vehicle repairs. To help offset these increase in the fire department, we would decrease capital expenditures, cost center 980, from $350,100 to $303,100. This is the $47,000 reduction that would help take care of the vehicle repair maintenance costs. And it's specifically the line item that's affected under capital expenditures is the capital improvement for the fire department. These are monies that were budgeted for the fire department for a replacement of tanker 905. That would reduce that line item from $150,000 to $103,000 for this year.
I'll second it.
Mr. Supervisor, I should just add in addition, as the footnote shows in the motion, that we will be moving $39,000 from our contingency reserves, which is under cost center 956, to help with the increase in the overall budget request. And if you noticed in your revenue expenditure report for the month, we are in a black position finally for the year. Our income has finally exceeded our expenses, and we're expecting another $500,000 in net revenues for the township over the course of the next 2 months. And we should end up with a surplus of approximately $200,000. I think this is a good investment for public safety for us to move these monies in our respective cost centers that are identified to help with these projected expenses for the fire department.
Okay, any questions?
I'd like to ask Jim.
Sir.
The vehicle that you showed us with the frame was rotted out. Is that also the one that has a top speed of 30 miles an hour?
No, that one is actually our better tank that I showed you. The other one is 30 years old, and that's the one that's in dire need of replacement. And that's beyond economical repair. To get the other one, it'd be probably about $20,000 to $40,000 just for the crate repairs.
That is the slowest truck I've ever seen.
We will not win any races with that with 9.5. But it brings water to the fire, and you know what? Any water that you can get to the fire is good water.
Right. Okay, anybody else? DJ?
Could you just explain between the in-house training and the off-site training?
Yes.
The budget need.
Okay, so in the next fiscal year, we're not going to use in-house versus out-of-house. It really is training. you notice that we hired, 4 firefighters, plus we've got 3 that are still in training. So as far as wages, those costs are to cover the firefighters that are taking external classes. And so that would be the fire academy right now, where they're going to Washtenaw Fire Academy. Would be our folks that are in the medical school being offered by HVA. And then the in-house classes would be the internal classes that the regular firefighters go every other Thursday. So those would be internal trainings where we bring instructors or train ourselves. As we're doing this upcoming Thursday, it'll be responding to hazardous material spills. So the difference is externally provided by somebody, and the other one would be internally provided by us for more of a refresher for the existing firefighters.
Okay, well, Jim, what about the things that always frustrated me is the Schoolcraft College, the union, the amount of monies that are in training, which just seems to be out the roof, that we are, because we're unionized, or you're unionized, that you have, that's the issue. I mean, when I look at them figures, it just seems ridiculous. But I understand we've got firefighters that were put in, and we have to get through this training.
So as a comparison, we put 3 firefighters through Schoolcraft College for firefighting 1 and 2. That costs us about $17,000 per firefighter. We're putting 2 firefighters through Washtenaw County. The cost per firefighter there is going to be estimated around $3,000 to $4,000. Schoolcraft is a fine institution, but they give you a lot more of a college, robust, rounded kind of education where they're doing PT, extra classes. That when you go to the fire academy at Washtenaw County, it's pretty much just that, just the fire, just the stuff that needs to get past the state qualifications. So, although Schoolcraft's a great college, I can't think we can afford to put anybody through that. And that was kind of a learning lesson on our part. I kind of inherited that. They were already in school before we went into, I took over as chief. They did a great job. They learned a ton of stuff, but at almost 3 times the rate, it's pretty hard to justify sending those guys to that.
Okay.
And some of that was done also partly for schedules too. The fire academy right now is at nighttime and then on weekends, and then Schoolcraft's of course during the day. So if you're available during the day, it's easier to fix for the guys and gals.
Okay.
I had a question. After we put our guys through the training, we hire them, bring them on, they go through the training, do we get a certain amount of commitment from them? How long do we get them?
Well, that's one of the things that we'd like to engage the union about, a kind of a commitment when we do that. There is some provisions within the union contract in our education policy that, like for example, if they're going for paramedic, that they have at least a 3-year commitment. I would like to approach that subject with the new contract negotiations. Like you said, we pretty much put in, 17, probably another 5 or 6, probably about $20,000 to $30,000 to a firefighter. There's no guarantee that they can walk out the door with what we gave them. Now, when we look at the selection process, we're looking for folks that are embedded in the township, that are going to be stable, that they want to do the job, they're going to be here. One of the things we might want to consider if we hire more firefighters is to hire somebody that's pre-qualified, already walks in the door with those. A lot of our costs are not so much the class per se, but it's the hours that we have to pay them. It's if you take a paramedic, that's over 1,000 hours of schooling, and that's that's a lot of money. It's $23 an hour we pay them. So that's where our costs come into. Really go off that.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, all those in, do we have a second on this already?
Yeah,
second, okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Supervisor, could I also have one word, one thing if you don't mind?
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you, but...
The motion passed, right?
All right, thank you, thank you. We talked about it at the Neighborhood Watch in Nixle. I don't know if anybody signed up for it, but I think it was Thursday, the other day, or I'm sorry, losing track because I work every day. 2 days ago, when it was really icy out, when the roads, particularly the dirt roads, and it rained, all the blacktop stuff and pavement was dry. but our roads were absolutely an ice rink. And I put out a Nixle alert, so if you don't have Nixle, NIXLE, it's a free app that you can download. It also sends you emails. The sheriff's office, probably 2 hours after I put one out, also put an alert out. The roads were absolutely atrocious. I mean, Superior got their fire trucks, 2 fire trucks stuck on the ice. I know that when I came out the driveway, because I live on a dirt road, my truck completely went sideways until it hit the dirt embankment on the other side, and that's with 4-wheel drive. So Nixle's a great tool to get information to you folks. Sign up for it. We encourage you to get on board with it. The sheriff's office releases a lot of information as far as, if they're looking for burglars or road closures. I try to put stuff out that's related to the fire side of things. Again, I just want to push that word out there because I do populate that every once in a while. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Okay, we moved on to the administrative, to the Board of Review appointment. I move that Salem Township appoint Ron McBride to the Salem Township Board of Review for a 2-year term beginning January 1st, 2013 and ending 12/31 of 2014. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Okay, I got a couple of resolutions here to read. To allow residents to protest in writing to the Board of Review in order to ease the burden of taxpayers, the assessor of the Board of Review, and to ensure that all taxpayers have an equal opportunity to be heard by the Board of Review, Salem Township hereby resolves, according to provision of MCL 21130 of the General Property Tax Act, that the Board of Review shall receive letters of protest regarding assessments from residents, taxpayers, from the first Tuesday in March until it adjourns from the public hearings for which it meets to hear such protest. All notices of assessments change and all advertisement of Board of Review meetings are to include a statement that the resident taxpayer may protest by letter to the Board of Review.
Support.
I believe we need a roll call on this.
All right. Converse,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
Wensley, yes. Whitaker,
Yes. Okay. Another resolution of Salem Township Board of Review Poverty Hardship Guidelines. Whereas the adoption of the guidelines for poverty exemptions is within the purview of the Township Board, and whereas the homestead of persons who, in the judgment of the supervisor and the Board of Review, by the reason of poverty hardship and unable to contribute to the public charges, is eligible for exemption in whole or part of taxation under Public Act 390, 1994, MCL 11-7. And whereas, pursuant to PA 390, 1994, Salem Township, Washtenaw County adopts the following guidelines for the supervisor and the Board of Review to implement. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Review shall follow the above state policy and follow guidelines in granting and denying an exemption.
Support.
we'll have a roll call vote. Daniel,
Yep.
Converse,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Wensley, yes. Trent,
Yes.
Whitaker,
Yes. Motion passes, or that resolution passes. Okay, we're down to cancellation of the fourth Tuesday meetings. Is find that in my packet here.
All right, Mr. Supervisor, I'm bringing a motion to approve the cancellation of meeting 2 times a month, going to the second Tuesday of every month. And this would affect February 26th, 2013 and March 26th, 2013. And this is pretty much being brought about as just trying to be more efficient with our time and thinking that we used to have once a month meetings and going back to that.
I second that. Any discussion? Okay. Any opposed? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Okay, down to item D, Three Cedars Farm application. I am going to recuse myself at this time. I am going to turn the meeting over to Mr. David Trent to conduct the meeting for the Three Cedar application.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. To begin our review of the application submitted by Three Cedars Farm, I'd like to recognize Mr. Pennington to review his findings of fact and the report that he provided to the Planning Commission last month.
Thank you. I'd like to briefly go over some information from a couple of perspectives. One is, we know what history Mr. Plato has given regarding how this project was initiated back in September. Based upon that, it went to the Planning Commission, and as it went to the Planning Commission, I was requested to do a report on this project, and I did that. Actually, I have done 2 reports that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first report was dated October 30th, and this was designed to go to the Planning Commission, evaluating all aspects of this proposal. I did another report dated January 21st, which resulted from the applicant making a couple changes in the overall application, so I revised my report, and that report also went to the Planning Commission. I'm not going to go over my report in detail. I'll answer whatever questions there are, but I feel that it's necessary to make a couple comments regarding the project, at least from a planning perspective. When I began my review of the project, I was well aware of what we normally refer to as conditional zoning. It's something that the state has allowed. It came in as part of Act 110 in 2006. This was a big updating of the enabling legislation by which a community can zone. What I did back in 2007, because there were a lot of changes that had to be recognized, that had to be looked at regarding the township's existing ordinance, I prepared a draft memorandum to the Planning Commission that was dated, or at least I have a revised copy here, dated February 19, 2007, where I methodically went through the state statute and recognized the changes there, and then made revisions in the zoning ordinance and went to the Township Planning Commission for review. Public hearing was held and went to the board. And I'm mentioning that information because of the one gentleman that made reference to conditional zoning, which I'll get into in just a moment. But that did allow the township to have what, or the state act allowed the township to what was determined to be conditional zoning. And let me take a couple seconds to state exactly what conditional zoning is, because there might be some miscommunication as to what conditional zoning is as it applies to the Three Cedar Farm and the report that I issued going back in October and a revised report in January. Conditional zoning is basically set up, and let me give an example of this. Let's say an individual comes to the township, and this has to be totally voluntary for an individual to come to the township. The township cannot request a citizen to follow this process. It's totally voluntary. But let's say an individual wants to come into this township, and I pulled the commercial existing zoning, and let's say that they have a parcel that according to the master plan is okay for various types of commercial. And he says, I would like to have an office. Now, that means that if the property's not zoned right, he has to go through a rezoning to get the property zoned. And then once the property's zoned, you have a list of permitted uses and a list of conditional uses. Permitted are permitted by right, conditional, you have to go through a process of public hearing. Now this, the township may say, well, gee, we don't really want to rezone into an outright commercial district, because if we do, that means that our decision would recognize every use, permitted and conditional, as being appropriate within that district. And the township may not want that. If the individual comes and says, I'd like to have an office, I need this zoning, but the zoning would say he could also have a gas station, he could have other types of commercial that the township may not feel is appropriate. So the individual says, okay, I will follow the conditional zoning process. I will submit an application that says I will only request an office in this particular property. That's the only thing that he's going to want. And the conditional zoning is that we go through a public hearing, planning commission recommendation, township board, and if the board approved it, the individual could only have an office in that rezoning, conditional rezoning amendment. He wouldn't have the right to all the other uses that may be within that district. That is conditional zoning. And the memorandum that I did in 2007, there was a recommendation in here that the township not allow conditional rezoning, conditional amendments as specified in Act 110. The township held a public hearing on it. Now, I made reference to the individual, I forget which one it was. We've had the opportunity to pull what the recommendation was going to the township board from the planning commission regarding all of these pages of revisions that I made reference to. That section of my memorandum, which was item G, did not appear in the packet that went to the township board. That was taken out. I don't know the reason. It's been a while. I couldn't find in the amount of time I had to determine how that took place. But this is the actual packet that's been brought to my attention, and all of my recommendations basically are here. Item G that I made reference to is not here. So the original memorandum that I included that would prohibit it did not pass on to the board, which took action and brought this into zoning amendment. So that issue, as far as this information that's been brought to my attention, should not have a bearing. One more thing, briefly. Even if that was in the ordinance, we're making a distinction here, and I'll go back to my report, and I was very careful in the very beginning to make this distinction about what the statute allows in conditional rezoning. That means it's a rezoning amendment. Keep in mind the word rezoning amendment. That basically means going from one zoning district, shall we say agriculture, to another zoning district, shall we say commercial, and the conditional zoning would allow, as I mentioned in my example, maybe an office where all the uses would not be specified. That is what the intent of the statute was, in my opinion, and that's what's referred to here as a rezoning amendment. What the applicant is doing, as far as my assessment when I was given all the information to write a report, was not a rezoning amendment. It was basically, not basically, he was using, or the applicant was using the agricultural district. The zoning was not being changed, but what the application contained were voluntary restrictions on the use of that property. In that application, the applicant said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. He had time of days, he had seasons, he had all of these types of things that were voluntarily, not requested by the township, but voluntarily submitted for review in this whole application process. So really it's a contract between the property owner and the three-seater farm. So even if we had that item G, as I proposed in my original memorandum, I'm convinced, at least in my interpretation, that what we're talking about here is not the exact legal definition of conditional zoning as it is implied in the statute 110 of 207. And this is something that is, it's voluntary, it's a map change perhaps, but it is not a rezoning into another category. And I make that clear in my report under item 2, both in the report dated October 30th and October 21st. So the information that's been provided me in the original assessment that I made in making this distinction between contract zoning and basically a voluntary uses by the applicant is what we're talking about here tonight. And again, even to clear it more, the packet that went to the board did not include that provision anyway. So if there's any questions, I have a report. I can give copies of the report, but I'm very specific in my assessment of this under item 2, which I talk about amendment to the zoning map versus rezoning. And I went from that perspective from the very beginning. So it's my opinion at this time that what's before you is something that you can proceed. If you have any questions, I'll gladly respond.
Mr. Pennington, if I could pose 2 questions, and if you could just, and I know you've already tried to elaborate on it already here in your past comment about the amendment to the zoning map. To some people that may sound like it's a rezoning. Could you just clarify again what amendment to the zoning map, which you have in italics under bullet point 2 in your report?
Yes.
What that means in relative to this whole process and its impact or connection with the 2007 Michigan Zoning Enabling Act.
Thank you very much. I was just in 2007, which in the board packet, it didn't go to the board for consideration. The easiest way, I think, to address that, the reason we said to the map, is that the map specifies AR, which is agriculture, for that piece of property. And it's a map change because restrictions have been placed upon that zoning category for that specific piece of parcel. So that's why I say it's basically a map change and not a rezoning item.
Okay, just for that specific parcel that
Specific
has
parcel.
these conditional uses that are being requested and potentially approved.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. My second point that I wanted to ask you, Mr. Pennington, is because I happen to be a member of the board back in 2007 when that ordinance was passed and adopted with the changes as a result of the Zoning Enabling Act of 2006 or 7, whatever year the legislature passed that. My recollection, and reviewing some emails that went around this afternoon regarding that subject matter, was it perhaps your thought process back at that time, 5 years ago, that because the township had entered into development agreements with the Showstack organization for properties on Goppertson Road and at the corner of Territorial and Napier, that the township's position at that time, in conjunction with the Zoning Enabling Act, is that we were not going to allow those types of rezonings, which at that time the state legislature had called that conditional rezoning. And if I'm misspeaking, please correct me. But that's kind of my recollection along that line too, is that the township had entered into 2 development agreements that allowed for rezoning of agricultural properties at that junction. One to general commercial, one to multifamily residential, and that this adoption or the proposed recommendation that you referenced would have precluded those kinds of things from happening because it would have been a complete rezoning of a property, potential, especially in the USD area.
Okay, again, very briefly. Saved by the bell.
I'm sorry.
Now you've knocked my train of thought out. Okay. I want to draw a distinction without going into much detail. Some of those properties, we get into what's termed consent judgment, and Mr. Plato will be much more qualified to go into that aspect, where the parties get together and through the courts they come out with a change in the land. The 2 things you made reference to, one is The reason that I put in my memo of 2007 a phrase that said that the township would not allow contract zoning was because I thought it was a very weak way to do any kind of zoning. It was mainly designed for townships that were not near as sophisticated as Salem Township. Salem Township had much better processes, procedures, for PUDs and things of that nature to accomplish something to a much greater extent. And I thought that utilizing that kind of a concept would not be appropriate for those reasons in Salem Township. Having it attached to what at that time was the generic term, development agreement, in my mind, didn't have a great deal to do with that. I was looking at it specifically as it was addressed in the state statute, statute 110 of 207, or 206, I guess it was. So there's that distinction, and I would, maintain that distinction. A pure development agreement, as it is now proposed within the zoning ordinance, is something that happens as part of an overall development concept. For example, if a individual wants to come in, shall we say, with a subdivision, there's a procedure and a process. There's a preliminary site plan, there's a final site plan. Each of those documents would provide certain information for review. The development agreement, as it's being proposed now, is an agreement not regarding zoning, but it's an agreement that would solidify certain things that need to be looked at from a contractual agreement standpoint. One example would be if you're dealing with a subdivision, you need infrastructure, roads, perhaps sewer and water, perhaps stormwater management. The development agreement could take into account the amount of money that would be set aside to cover those costs. It's a separate contractual agreement. So in hopefully answering your question, back in 2007, I don't think there was a lot of thought that I would recommend against contractual zoning because of the controversy with that agreement with the people over on Godfreyson Road. But it was a separate, because I did not think it was an action that should be considered by the township. The township had a really good ordinance. It could cover those types of aspects. And then a development agreement is something that now is being much better defined as something that would take place after a final site plan is approved by the planning commission, and the development agreement would be the contractual agreement between the applicant or the property owner and the township board. If that answers your question, sir.
For the time being, it does. Thank you.
Okay, can we ask questions?
Would any other members of the board have any questions for Mr. Pennington at this time? You may have an opportunity to ask later, but do you have any questions at this time?
I do. Mr. Pennington, hi, I'm Mary Beth Schmidt. Nice to meet you. I was wondering, just for clarification in my mind on terms, we've got conditional use zoning, right? And then there's rezoning amendments. These are not interchangeable. These are different things, right?
Yes, technically. If you look at the term rezoning, by itself means rezoning from one district to another district. The process, that's rezoning. It's rezoning from agriculture to residential to commercial, something of that nature. That is rezoning, by definition.
Okay.
Is there another part of the question?
I don't know, I was hearing other terms around the conditional use when you were talking about conditional use. It seemed like there was one other term floating around out there that I thought, are these the same thing, or is this yet another layer?
If I can come close to addressing it. Okay, as I mentioned, in a zoning district, you can have basically two kinds of uses. Permitted uses by right. And let's just say in a residential district, a single family dwelling is permitted by right. That means you can build it, you gotta meet some codes, you gotta build it, you gotta get zoning compliance, etc. A conditional use, or sometimes referred to as a special use, is something that can also take place in that district, but because of its potentially greater impact, it has to be looked at in a special process. For example, in most residential districts, single family or committed by right, such things as, let's say, a church building can take place in a residential, but it might have more impact than you would expect from a residential dwelling. Greater traffic at certain times, etc. impacts. So that's why that would be called a conditional use, or some communities a special use. And then the conditional zoning that we've made reference to is something that came out in the statute, which is a process that I've talked about, where the individual comes in and say, hey, I would like to have my land rezoned into that category, but I do not want to have the liberty of coming in with any use, either permitted or conditional. I would only want one specified use within that district. That's the conditional zone.
Thank you.
One more question, Mr. Pennington. Is conditional use within one zoning, since we'll just say agricultural, is conditional use a proper technique used in Salem Township? Can we do that? Can we do conditional use in Salem Township?
Yes, every zoning ordinance, at least shall we say in the state of Michigan, every district, residential, agriculture, commercial, whatever, all of those districts have those two types of possible uses, permitted uses and conditional uses.
That's a right, that's just part of the statute.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when you're dealing with a conditional use, most ordinances will have a list of conditions that you have to meet, whatever they are. If you meet those conditions, then you have the right to that use. If you can't meet those conditions, you do not have the right to that use.
So it has nothing to do with this case?
And Mr. Pennington, just to further elaborate on Dell's question, if I'm not mistaken, I think as part of our zoning ordinance, there's a section, I think it's 63, that deals with conditional uses and that would delineate the very types of processes that you've outlined earlier. You know, the public hearing and you know, the process that an applicant needs to go through.
That is correct.
So you know, we do have sections within our ordinance that detail the kinds of subject matters that Mr. Pennington has referenced. So it is a practice that one can be employed. If I can ask Mr. Pennington and perhaps Ms. Cripps to tag team on this next issue, just for the benefit of this board, because this is the first zoning application that this new board has had to deal with, and also for perhaps the benefit of some of our citizens that have not had the opportunity to come to the Planning Commission meetings when this subject was brought up previously. Could you just outline very quickly what the specific special uses, if that's the right term, or requests for the seasonal use entail for the Three Cedars Farm application?
Okay, I'll respond if I could.
Sure.
If you had a copy of my report, either the one dated October 30th or 21st, I have itemized all of those on page 2, talking about each one of them individually and how I believe that they are compatible with the agricultural district. We're talking about the seasonal uses, as you've made reference to. The applicant has simply said that the uses that he is proposing would only take place during certain times of the year. And that's where I'm getting back to, he's voluntarily saying that these uses would only take place during this time of year. Some of the uses that are specified here would necessitate under, I think it's section 320 of the, section 3.20 of the existing zoning ordinance, would mean that they would have to come to the township board, or he would, to get a permit to have some kind of activity. I think of one. If you want to have a little carnival activity or something like that, it's something that any resident in this community would have to go to the township board to get approval for that. What this application is saying is, this is what I want to do with these activities. Please give me a, so I don't have to come back every year, and do this. That's reasonable. The other one here is I was looking at accessory uses. There's all kinds of uses here that you would expect for an agricultural operation or a tourism operation or for something of that nature. But there's some that could be considered accessory, and I've made reference to those. The application included a commercial, shall I say, commercial type of activity where products are sold on site. In my assessment, I said that can be considered an accessory use to this overall operation. It does not have a sign, it has limited square footage, things of that nature. It is not a standalone commercial kind of activity. And I classified that as an accessory which could take place within the agricultural district. There's other things that the applicant specified in his application, and I simply said that based upon what is allowed within the AR district, those things are permitted by right. So those are the three classifications: permitted by right, things that I believe are accessory, and the activities that the applicant on a yearly basis would have to go and get a permit from the board under section 320. So it's pretty clear. So I've itemized all of those on pages 2 and 3 of my report.
Any further questions for Mr. Pennington or Ms. Cripps? One last question I would have, Mr. Pennington, before we entertain a formal motion on the table for discussion. During public comment, one of the citizens posed the question about the difference between what the applicant is requesting and coming back to the board for an annual request, and you kind of touched on that here in your last comment. Is there any other elaboration that you could
No, I think that this agreement means that whatever is specified here is what the board would be acting upon. The limitations that's specified here is what the board is acting upon. So if you act upon this, it stands as a document, and the applicant is bound by what is stated within this application. Only way it could be changed is if the applicant came back at some future date and went through the process and asked it for an amendment, and then again would come back to the board.
And on that point, Mr. Pennington, just for clarification and the benefit of this board, that this application, in its consideration and deliberation by this body, is either approved in whole or denied in whole. Is that correct?
That is correct. The action, both with the Planning Commission and the board, is to take what has been set before you. You cannot ask for anything in addition. You can't ask for other conditions. You can't ask for anything. You have to say, this is what has been submitted, and that's what you take action on.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Before we, Mr. Converse and then Ms. Schmidt.
One other question, I think, for clarification. The longevity of this, does this stay with the present owner, or would this be with the deed to the property and stays with the property?
Stays with the property.
Ms. Schmidt?
My question, Mr. Pennington, is it's pretty clear to me that the landowner, the homeowner, can keep this for as long as they wish without changes and all that. But what about is there any way for a board of trustees to revoke the conditional usage?
Okay, very good question. Yes, there is. When you're looking at, we could go into conditional use, I don't want to get into the terms, but this is an agreement between the applicant and the township. The conditions that are set before you are the conditions of this contract. If the applicant does something that is contrary to this agreement, as it's specified, then action can be taken regarding what you specified.
Any other conditions that would allow, I mean, can a board make an ordinance in the future to undo this kind of thing? I'm just looking
This is the
for,
contract
you
agreement.
know, down the road, the board changes, what kind of protection does an applicant have if maybe a future board doesn't like what's going on?
This is a contractual agreement between these two parties. You'd have to have, I don't mean to get into Mr. Plato, but you'd have to have both parties in agreement for any change.
Okay, thank you.
It's between the township and the landowner, so even though the board may change, that agreement stays in place.
Okay, I still want to know, like, what sort of revenge can be placed on somebody if they anger the board of trustees, you know, 10, 15 years from now, and now they're being harassed, and what can be done to undo these sort of...
It would have to be a mutual between the current landowner of that property and the current township board.
So you're saying a mutual withdrawal of this?
Or mutual change, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. If I could just emphasize something that Mr. Pennington raised. With regard to the confusion of rezoning and conditional zoning of the property, the statute that applies here under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act is 125.3405. What that section provides is that an owner of the land can come to the township and in writing offer or request that the township approve certain uses of the property. And what the statute specifically says is there's two different situations. First of all, the owner can come and ask for a conditional rezoning of the land, or they can ask for an amendment to the zoning map. Now, the reason there's two different things in the statute is because there are in fact two separate things. And this is not a rezoning of the property that we're doing here. This is an amendment to the zoning map. And it's amendment simply by the request to add those specific uses that have been requested, to add those basically onto the zoning map. We're not rezoning the property. The property is agricultural. It'll remain agricultural residential. So this is not a rezoning. So for that reason, that part of the statute doesn't apply, and the prior ordinance that apparently was adopted doesn't apply. I also was aware that, and Mr. Pennington and I have had this discussion even before this issue came up today. It's my understanding that in the new ordinances being considered by the board, that there was this prohibition with regard to a request for conditional zoning. And under Michigan law, if there is an ordinance that is inconsistent with the state statute, it's invalid. The state statute would preempt the local ordinance. So if Mr. Pennington were to come to me today and say, can we have this provision in our ordinance, I would say most likely not, because the state law permits this and preempts what the ordinance would provide. And basically, if you look at what was sent to the Planning Commission in 2007, it says conditional rezoning is authorized by Section 405 of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act shall be prohibited. Well, if it's authorized by the Zoning Enabling Act, you can't prohibit it. I mean, just by that very term, they're inconsistent.
How did that even get passed?
Well, I don't think there was any review of it at the time. I think Mr. Pennington's indicated it never went to the board, at least his analysis never went to the board. I don't know if it ever made it past the Planning Commission.
So it wasn't passed.
Pardon?
No, it went down part of your, it went forward or not? Can I say something?
Very good. Before we move forward, I just wanted to give Ms. Cripps, our Community Development Administrator, an opportunity to add anything over and above her written letter that was submitted in the board package.
I will tell you that the unapproved minutes that you have from January 28th have been approved by the Planning Commission. This issue was discussed at the Planning Commission, I believe, at 3 different meetings. They held a public hearing, and then held another meeting, and then the applicant revised his request and came back forward. So it has been thoroughly vetted at the Planning Commission level.
Very good, thank you. Before we have a formal motion brought to the table for discussion, I'd like to ask the applicant and/or his legal counsel if there are any changes that need to be made in submission to this application, or if it stands before this board in its current form, unchanged.
Thank you, Trustee Trent. Paul Bond, legal counsel for Three Cedars Farm. What you should have before you is the January 16th, 2013 cover letter that explains the application. The only amendment that was made was presented to the Planning Commission was the addition of pony rides. And pony rides that would take place during the same fall and winter season that all the other activities take place at the same time and at a location as identified on the map that you received. With that particular amendment, there are no further changes, and we certainly appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much. I believe at this time it would be appropriate to entertain a formal motion for board discussion. I'll recognize T.J. McLaughlin for the purposes of introducing a motion for board discussion.
Can we ask questions?
You're not recognized, please.
Well, I just asked one.
We don't have a motion on the table at this time. T.J.?
Okay. I move that Salem Township approve the conditional zoning land use application 12-003 of Three Cedars Farm located at 7897 6 Mile Road to allow a seasonal business on the site as recommended by the Salem Township Planning Commission and adopt resolution 2013-02-12-03 to amend the official zoning map of Salem Township. I have a second.
There's a support.
I second it.
Supported by Mrs. Schmidt. TJ is the maker of the motion. I would defer to you at this time for any comments that you would like to make regarding this motion to approve the conditional land use application of Three Cedars Farm.
Just going with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, it was recommended, passed to adopt the resolution after much discussion.
Mrs. Schmidt is the seconder of the motion. Would you like to make any comments at this time?
After listening to both sides with, Mr. Pennington and Mr. Plato, I don't really have any reservations at all about going through with this conditional use zoning. I think it's above and beyond on Mr. Whitaker's part that he's been more than proper and fair and has shown incredible just class throughout this whole thing, more than I think the average person could show under the circumstances.
Mr. Plato, if I could ask a question of you, as part of the motion that Ms. T.J. McLaughlin has brought forward, we're referencing a resolution. Should that actually be the ordinance number 2013-02-12-001 instead of a resolution?
I think the resolution is sufficient for this purposes for this minor amendment.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Mr. Substitute Supervisor, if I could just interject for a moment. I did notice in the packet there is a document entitled Exhibit 1, which was not part of the application. That was due to the Planning Commission. I think it was part of the original application and should have been from this packet.
I'll ask him after.
So I'd ask that would be removed from this particular packet and application. It's entitled Exhibit 1. And it was included in error as one copying the documents. It was not intended to be part of the application.
Are you familiar with Exhibit 1, Donna?
Yeah, that is the original application that was submitted.
And
It doesn't need to be part of the application.
okay. Consider Exhibit 1 to be deleted from the application. Is there any other discussion amongst the board on the motion that's on the floor to approve the conditional zone land use application of Three Cedars Farm? Mr. Converse.
I'd like to ask Mr. Plato a question. You have heard the comments from the citizens prior to. In your judgment, is there merit to their claims? for proceeding with further legal action with regards to going after this case?
Well, do I think it's defensible? Is that your question? If they were to bring legal action, yes, I think it's very defensible. Unfortunately, anybody with $100 in their pocket can file legal action against the township if they so wish, but whether it's meritorious or not is a totally different story. I think a claim in this case would not be meritorious.
Okay, good, thank you.
TJ, if I could ask you a question as part of our discussion and deliberation. I know partly because of the publicity this issue has received in the local press, the comments that were generated during the public comment, during its review at the Planning Commission level. As our new liaison to the Planning Commission, could you perhaps summarize as best as you can some of the pros and cons that were cited during that discussion at the Planning Commission level? And if we could also possibly defer to some of our consultants and our zoning administrators on the issue of right to farm, which I know has gotten a lot of discussion up to this point in time, and what we've learned tonight regarding the amendment to the zoning map.
I think I would probably defer that to Doug and Donna, who know more about it.
We had the public hearing, and I think that was on November 8th. That's when this first came up to the public. There were a lot of issues raised on right to farm. And as Mr. Pennington rightly pointed out in his review letters, a lot of what Three Cedars Farm does fall under the Right to Farm Act and is allowable. What he was asking for was the accessory uses that went along with his operation, the general store, and those other issues that Mr. Pennington covered very thoroughly in his letter. Right to Farm is an important part of this because a lot of what he does is approved by Right to Farm, but that is not the only aspect of this application. It includes some of those issues, but also expands and takes in some of the lesser accessory commercial uses that he's involved in. I think this was a new procedure for the Planning Commission and also for the public, and I think it's taken a while for people to understand the process. As Mary Beth said, the language is confusing. It is not a rezoning of the property. The property remains agricultural, and he is allowed to do those right to farm issues on his property as anyone else who lives within that district can also do. What he has done is put some accessory uses with his right to farm to enhance his operation for the public, and that is why he is here tonight.
But it's limited,
That explains it well.
Very good, thank you, Donna. Any other questions, discussion amongst the board? There would be no objection from the board members. As chair of this part of the meeting, I'll entertain any specific questions or concerns from citizens that are in attendance tonight. Hearing none, I presume that we are ready for the vote. The motion on the floor that's been properly seconded is to approve the conditional zoning land use application 12-003 of Three Cedars Farm, located at 7897 6 Mile Road, to allow a seasonal business on the site as recommended by the Salem Township Planning Commission, and adopt resolution 2013-02-12-03 to amend the official zoning map of Salem Township. This requires a roll call vote. Clerk Wensley, will you please read the roll?
Converse?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
McLaughlin?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Trent?
Yes.
Wensley, yes. And Whitaker has abstained.
Motion has been officially approved. And I'll ask Supervisor Whitaker to come and retake the gavel.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here tonight. Let's move on, get right on with our business here. The clerk's report, you have in the expenditures in your packet. And now the next big issue is our board discussion on the draft budget for the coming year. So we have actually a PowerPoint, or if that's what you want to call it, a draft that we can put up to show you what we're proposing and maybe have some board discussion about that. It's coming on.
Maybe lift it up about an inch.
It's about as high as I can go.
Screen come down lower.
Huh? Come. This is Joe.
Jim, just move to all this.
I've got all
Yeah, that way. I will lead the discussion on the budget, but many of us on the board here can give different inputs on this, and there's 20 slides. Once we get into it, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time, but if any of us on the board wants to make any comments or questions, please feel free to give your input. I get it on the iPad. This is a balanced budget for 2013-2014. You can go to the next slide. This is the revenue, the budgeted revenue for our township. And we are a unique township in one way that we have landfill revenue. You can see that our total revenue budgeted for 2013-14 is $2,416,200, and the percentages, hopefully you can all see that. 45% of that is from landfill gas revenues. The other 25% is from the landfill agreement. 17% is from the state shared revenues, meaning the state of Michigan shares their revenues with our township, and 4% is interest income, 3% is utility fees, 3% is miscellaneous fees, miscellaneous revenue, and the last 3% is permits and fees. Next slide, sign.
Any questions?
I've got a question. What's the increase from past to past year in terms of percentage?
Actually, we're not forecasting an increase in revenue this year compared to last year. Interest income is going down significantly because of the lower interest rates. It's being offset by an increase in royalties from landfill gas royalties and also tipping fees. Thank you.
All right, we can go to the next slide. This is the expenditures for the board. We have, I tried to bold it on the, so if you look on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see the requested budget of $36,082. If I had a little light here, we don't have one of those, but just always look on the bottom left. The very last number on the bottom line will be the requested amount. I'm saying left? I'm sorry, bottom right. Boy, that's, yeah, really. Second screen, the next screen is the township supervisor's budget, $81,805. Next screen, we have two. We have the independent auditing and the assessing budget. The independent auditing is $30,000. The assessing budget is $95,666. The Next screen will have the legal fees.
Hello.
And we are definitely lowering the budget for legal fees down to $100,000.
Or less.
Or less. Let's hope for less. Next screen is the township. The township clerk, $78,683. The next screen has the Board of Review and the Township Treasurer's accounts. Board of Review, $4,142, Township Treasurer, $81,647. Next screen is elections. There will not be, the major election like we had last year, so our requested budget is only $4,400. The Township Hall and Office, we have an increase up to $157,665. The next screen is the Land Preservation and Conservation Board. We do have an increase up to $34,088. Community Development, an increase up to $105,923. Next screen is the Planning Commission and Engineering Services, an increase to $46,833, and engineering $10,000.
That $10,000, just for the board, is for projects related to the wastewater treatment plant that Stantec will be working on.
We have the next screen is other consultants, which is basically some of the IT technology needs. We have an increase to $22,000, and the Zoning Board of Appeals is $1,852. The Fire Department, we have a small increase to $437,628. Police, we have $315,000. We have highways and roads, $303,000, and the fringe benefits and insurance, $47,000.
Dale, if I could just interject real quick, for the police department, that $315,000 reflects for the first time a complete year's budget with 2 deputies on board. At this point, our current fiscal year is only showing 1.25 deputies because we just added the new deputy January 1st. So we've got a significant increase in public safety and police services for this upcoming fiscal year. And maintaining roads at the current level that we did last year, $300,000.
And here are just some other functions that the township will go through. Most of it is in the general fund contingency, $206,785. And the bottom, capital expenditures, we have $216,000 in capital expenditures.
And if I could just address that so that the board's aware of what we're proposing to do. In capital expenditures, cost center 980, there's $150,000 budgeted for the fire department. As part of the upgrade and enhancement to firefighting capability of some of our equipment, Chief Rockwell has recommended that we invest in a 200-gallon high-pressure, low-volume tank for Rescue 911, and also a 200-gallon low-pressure tank for Brush Utility Vehicle 904. Those 2 items will cost $55,000 between both of them. And what we are recommending is that we spend those monies early in the new fiscal year after April 1st, that $55,000 of capital expenditures be deducted, and then the balance at the end of the fiscal year carry over toward monies that have been committed toward replacing Tanker 905, that 30-year vehicle that Chief Rockwell mentioned earlier. And at the beginning of fiscal year 14-15, the plan is to commit additional monies that we would then have enough monies saved up at that point to actually buy the vehicle. We put $150,000 or so a year ago. We had about $100,000 that carried over, or that will carry over this year, and so another $95,000 for this year. You know, come April or May of next year, we'll commit the funds to pull the trigger, and Chief Rockwell will be putting his specs together, because it takes a year to actually order a new fire truck. So he'll be coming back to the board with what those specs are and the quotes, so that we can give him authorization to move forward pending board approval.
I've got a question. In regards to total expenditure, how do we compare from last year to this year?
It'll be higher this coming year, primarily because you're going to have another deputy, and we're spending what's going to be less money in fire department compared to what we just amended our budget to. But overall, it's going to be higher because of the investment in police services. But the other, by and large, most of the cost centers are either at or below the levels that were projected for this current year.
By what percentage is the overall increase?
I don't have that number.
Okay, there's the sewer fund. Go to the next screen there, Jim, if you can. This is the sewer fund revenues. This is a separate fund from the general fund that we've just been talking about, just so that the public knows that. So revenues collected through the sewers of $224,562, and the next screen will have the budget for that, which is basically a wash, $224,562. Yeah, that's the last slide. So when you add both funds, you have the estimated revenues and estimated expenses, 2.6, right around 2.6 million. And that is the budget, Mr. Supervisor.
So everybody has copies of these, so what we can discuss them now. If you have some questions you'd like to ask, feel free to do that this time. The next few weeks, we need to be looking at it, and if there's questions. And I believe the process goes in the paper. There's a public hearing on this.
Yes, so we'll have a public hearing at our
Since we're new.
Meeting, our only scheduled meeting for March.
Okay.
Will be the public hearing, and that'll be the opportunity for the public to give their input verbally at that. Of course, they can submit comments in writing if they so desire prior to the meeting, and we can take those into consideration before our final approval of the budget. And again, the budget is just a working guideline. We can obviously amend it and tweak it throughout the course of the fiscal year, depending on whatever needs we identify as we move forward.
I've got one question. In regards to the expenditures equal to revenue, so based on the numbers, so I take it then we aren't putting anything aside for...
Well, actually, in Cost Center 956, there's a line item called contingencies.
Right.
That's in there to help make it all balance out. So we are forecasting a reserve of $200,000 for the year.
Okay.
So in essence, we're estimating revenue of 2.4 and expenditures of 2.2.
Okay. I always like surplus.
And also, just to the public too, just before public comment too, is that, you know, if you do, if the budget is online, or you can get a copy of it or come in, and if you do have questions, feel free to call anytime to discuss what is proposed before public hearing, or we vote on this in March. Also, is there more discussion up here? I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay. Also, you'd be glad to know that all of these folks here are very well-educated students now. They've all been at the MTA conference in Detroit, and they just are very good students. The only person was your supervisor who wasn't a very good student, had a hard time paying attention, but we did have a good time and walked away with some knowledge. So hopefully you will see it in the future from us. Okay, where are we at? We're at public comment. Yes. Your next comment.
I was very pleased Jim, to see your concern to get the tanker trucks fixed and hopefully they'll hold water. But I'm very disappointed that we still have to drive them to the next county to fill them. Why can't our township drill a hole in the ground, get some water without rocks in it, so we can fill these tanker trucks where we use them? If Jim's guys empty a tanker at a fire, they have to drive to Oakland County to refill the tank. It's crazy. What's that in your budget? I don't know what a 6-inch well adequate to do this job is going to cost, but whatever it is, find out and put it in your budget. We need that.
Thank you. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Carl. Bonnie, you're next. I seen your hand go up, so.
It says in the closed session that you're going to talk about land preservation and conservation. Well, I want you to remember that the word perpetuity does not mean forever. If you buy somebody's land development rights for perpetuity, it's only for 50 years. And you all have younger children there. By the time they're 50 years old, they'll be having to rebuy those land rights and development rights. So buying land development rights isn't what it's cracked up to be.
Okay, Jim?
To your comment, sir, I wanted to recognize the late Mr. Fulkerson, who did lend us the use of his high-capacity pump, and we filled our trucks up there a number of times. He's done that for a number of years, and it's his untimely passing, but the family has still graciously allowed us to use that well out there, and I just wanted to thank their family and the support that they've given the township. As you alluded to, good water supplies are tough to find, and that family is bent over backwards and never asked anything from us. So I really appreciate the fact that Mr. Fulkerson and their family has allowed us to fill our trucks up there when the need arises. So, point well taken, sir.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, someone else. Mr. Quigley.
Yes, thank you. I noticed that in the closed session today, we had the Land Preservation and Conservation Board purchase of developmental rights. And this is another meeting that's going to be behind closed doors. And I think it's really offensive to the public's right to know what's going on in the government. And every time it comes, it's behind the closed doors, and you can't get any information. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, Who's next? That's it? All right, so I'm going to turn it over to going into closed session for Mr. Trent, right?
And Mr. Supervisor, I move that Salem Township go into closed session pursuant to MCL 15.2688D to consider the purchase of real property conservation easement rights. Members of the Land Preservation Conservation Board, Consultant Barry Wanick, and legal counsel to attend.
I'll second.
And I believe we need a roll call on this?
That's correct, Mr. Supervisor.
All right.
All right. Whitaker?
Yes?
Wensley? Yes. Trent?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Laughlin?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Connors?
Yes. So we will move on to closed session and have a short break. Stay till 9 o'clock.
Grab a piece of cake.
And have a piece of cake and happy Valentine's Day, everybody.